Dominant 7, sharp 9. I always thought this chord was a little unusual because of the stuff that's in it. This is of course more popularly known as the Hendrix chord, or the Purple Haze chord, because it is featured prominently in the song Purple Haze by none other than the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Hendrix used this chord a bunch, which is why it's often associated with him, but it's not like he invented it or anything. It's a chord that's often used in blues, rock, jazz, funk, R&B, but the way this chord works can be a little confusing. So I thought I'd go through how it's constructed first, then we'll look at how it can be used. The technical name is a dominant 7th sharp 9th chord. This means your foundation is a dominant 7th chord. That's a root, a major 3rd, a perfect 5th, and a minor 7th. This alone tells you pretty much everything you need to know about how this chord functions. In a major key, this chord quality only occurs as the 5 chord. The term dominant basically means anything having to do with the 5th scale degree. When you hear a dominant 7th chord, it's screaming at you, I am the 5 chord. It wants to resolve to its respective 1 chord. The funny note in this chord is of course the sharp 9th. It's not terribly uncommon to add a 9th to a dominant 7th chord. A major 9th would be the same thing as a major 2nd above the root plus an octave. The octave displacement just prevents all the notes from getting clustered together. A major 9th is what's added to a dominant 7th chord in a generically labeled 9th chord. A dominant 7 flat 9 has a minor 9th added, the same thing as a minor 2nd above the root plus an octave. This is much more dissonant and tense. The sharp 9th is a little strange. It's an augmented 9th above the root, which is a different spelling of a minor 10th, which is the same thing as a minor 3rd plus an octave. A minor 3rd in a chord that has a major 3rd in it. So it's got both. They're just way spaced out. It sounds brighter than the other two, but it also sounds like it has a mean look on its face. How do you use it? We can look at this in two ways. We can take the acoustic approach and recognize how the tendency tones within it want to resolve, and we can look at what people actually do with it. Those two things aren't always mutually exclusive. We'll take the acoustic approach first. Overall, this wants to go to the 1 chord, which is going to be some harmony on A. To me, it has a more satisfying resolution if it goes to a major chord, but we'll look at the minor option as well. So first off, the dominant 7th chunk of it. I'm just going to refer to this as the 5 chord to save some syllables. The root of the 5 chord wants to go to the root of the 1 chord. The 3rd of the 5 chord also wants to go to the root of the 1 chord. The 5th of the 5 chord could go to the 3rd of the 1 chord or the root of the 1 chord. Or I could just omit the 5th from the 5 chord entirely. That's generally preferred. The 7th of the 5 chord wants to go to the 3rd of the 1 chord. When this happens, you get the tritone resolution between the 3rd and 7th of the 5 chord. That's all standard stuff. Now what do we do with this sharp 9th? Anything not in your key signature that you label as sharp is implied to want to resolve a half step upward. Likewise, anything you label as flat will tend to want to resolve a half step downward. So our sharp 9th ought to go a half step upward when it resolves. That gives us the note a major 7th above the root of the 1 chord, producing a major 7th chord. So really all the sharp 9th does is give the dominant chord some tanginess. If it were to go to a minor chord, it might do this. Or this. Neither of those are particularly satisfying. So this resolution is just based on an objective look at this chord and how it's constructed. How do people actually use it? Sometimes like this, but not always. Hendrix in Purple Haze went E7 sharp 9 to G to A. The wanted resolution is kind of happening, but not in a super direct way. The E7 sharp 9 should go to the A. But it steps over the G on the way. The G acts as a substitution or a coloration on the E7 sharp 9. You could just do all G and it'll still basically function the same way. It's just a lot less interesting. Another famous use of this chord is at the end of Pat Benatar's Hit Me With Your Best Shot. It's a little afterthought at the end. That little boing boing thing at the end reveals a lot about how people like to use this chord, especially in blues-based music such as rock and roll. The blues is full of what we usually call blue notes, or the notes that give the blues its particular musical flavor. One of them is the minor third of the key you're in. In fact, the blues is largely based on this confused modality situation where major and minor are juxtaposed, like how you play a minor pentatonic scale over its parallel major chord. The dominant 7 sharp 9 chord is, in my mind, that juxtaposition personified. Because the chord has both a major and minor third in it, we just call the minor third a sharp 9. You can hear this juxtaposition in the head of Red Line by the band Marvin. So there you go. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.